It was on the night of August 14th, 1947, when the Indian subcontinent woke up to freedom at the stroke of midnight. How could this great colonial power, Britain, which ruled over India for nearly 200 years, just pack up its bags and leave? Was this purely due to the great non-violent struggle led by Mahatma Gandhi, or did equal forces play an important role? In today's video, we're going to untangle the real story behind why Britain left India and explore the events you probably weren't taught in school. Before we understand why Britain left, first we need to go back how they ruled. It was basically a trading company established in 1600, but turned itself into a military and political machinery in the mid-18th century, especially after the victory of the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Thus, India became the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, which greatly helped to bolster their economy. It had been for Indians that, in the 19th century, nearly 50% of Britain's textile exports were produced from Indian raw cotton, and through economic exploitation, deindustrialization and famine destroyed the local people. Resistance was sown much before 1947. First and foremost, the major revolt against the British rule occurred in 1857, called the Revolt of 1857, which had a defeat. Political movements began to take form, more notably the Indian National Congress towards the late 19th and early 20th century. Leaders such as Gopal Krishna Gokhale clamored for constitutional changes. Of course, others like Bal Gangadhar Tilak were far more radical. Let's not forget also the divide and rule policy by the British. Probably one of the most vivid examples of this was a partitioning of Bengal in 1905 divided Hindus and Muslims. The two world wars had seriously battered the British rule over India. Over 1.3 million Indian soldiers were sent to fight for the British in the First World War, but the result was a rising unrest. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919 made many moderate Indians extreme nationalists. Over 2.5 million contributed in the Second World War, but Britain's economy had sucked dry. Britain was no world power by 1945 at all, thanks to huge loans from the United States. In fact, its debt to GDP ratio increased to almost 250% at the end of the war, so it was getting very tough to support such a large empire. Now, everybody knows about the role of Gandhi in India's independence. His philosophy of non-violence inspired mass movements like the non-cooperation movement, 1920, civil disobedience, 1930, and Quit India, 1942. Of course, there is another factor as well, and one which has often been slighted: the influence of Subhash Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army, INA. The military victories of the INA were narrow enough, but its presence sent shock waves throughout the British Indian Army and created a whole series of mutinies. In 1946, the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny, Naval Mutiny of 1946. It is a lesser research history where some Indian sailors, in fact, all who were enlisted in the whole British fleet, had risen in revolt demanding independence and humane treatment of them. This made the British understand that they could not rely anymore on Indian soldiers for them to implement their rule. In Britain, it was the Labour government led by Clement Attlee who came into power in 1945. Attlee was far from Churchill. He was much more amenable to the decolonization concept, at least partly due to economic compulsions and growing pressure all over the world. Communal tensions had been building up in India since 1946. The British hastened their exit, but this hasty plan had tragic implications. The Mountbatten Plan of June 1947 had finally settled upon partition for India and Pakistan, an impulsive decision to ward off communal violence, if not actually born out of it. But still, it was an ad hoc exercise. Millions were forcibly evacuated from their homes, and more than 1 million killed in the aftermath. Most historians consider that Britain took to partition as an exit strategy to escape the responsibility of the management of post-colonial instability. It was the day when Gandhi, Nehru, and Jinnah played a great role to gain independence. It is also very important to look at the wider aspect of the history. Britain has left India not for one cause, but because of the economic drain of such magnitude, pressure from the outside, mass movements, and this insatiable resistance that is gathering its pace within their own ranks. It is this day of freedom. This time we learn some lessons from history, whatever it may be, institutional or in terms of cost. The stories about division, unity are tough lessons in